So thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about negotiating through. And so there are levels to this, right? When we think about the high cost of everything right now because of inflation, our wages sometimes don't match that. So we're going to be talking about how do you negotiate? Be those negotiations as you are at work and you're negotiating for the salary that, actually reflects the work that you're doing and the expertise that you have. Negotiating if you're purchasing a new car or you have to make a larger purchase, and just how to really show up for yourself and to negotiate. Joining us today is our producer, Ariel, and we're just going to get into it.
Yes, so you mentioned a lot in the sense of, I feel like when people initially hear the word negotiation or negotiating, they immediately go to, of course, money, job, and other things that we buy. But I like how you mentioned yourself, your own worthiness, and negotiating how to navigate life, whether it's with assertiveness or compromise or anything like that. So it'll be fun to dive into this. Where do you want to go first?
Yeah, I want to share a personal experience that recently happened for me. So I had my vehicle for 12 good years, okay? She works hard for her coins and I didn't want a car note. And so then it reached the point where little things on my car weren't working. I was making a lot of noise. The gas mileage wasn't what it used to be. Cruise control didn't work. Door always squeaked. But the last straw was when the music did not want to sync during a long drive. Okay, I cannot do that. So for me, I had to get another vehicle. And so in searching for another vehicle, I was fortunate enough to have lots of friends and family who were doing research with me, trying to help me find the best deal. But what I didn't realize is that a lot of these dealerships use a lot of these old-fashioned sales tactics. And so I was really caught off guard by the prices being one thing on their sticker and online, and them telling me that the vehicle was one price, and then getting there and them wanting to charge me an extra $10,000. One of the things that they said was that there's a market rate adjustment. That was an additional $6,000, and I was shook it.
So you tackling this world as a woman, as a Black woman, what did you come up against?
Yeah, I was surprised that when I worked with some Black males, I thought, okay, we're family, maybe you're going to be a straight shooter. That was not my experience. So they did things like when they wanted to evaluate my car for a trade-in, and yes, I know trading in your vehicle's not the best way to get the most value for it, but she busy, okay? And they would keep my car keys. So when I was ready to leave the dealership because they weren't offering me what I needed, I couldn't just get up and leave because they still had my car keys. And so then they would agree to a price and they'd go back and say, well, the manager said I can't offer it at this price. And they just were kind of adding on kind of additional hidden cost and just really being dishonest and unethical.
I guess to me it seems like an oxymoron for car dealers with ethics, because they come up with a stereotype, and it seems like your process is kind of proving the stereotype. So with us being in Central Illinois, did you go elsewhere to look for cars?
Yeah, I did. I ended up going about 2 hours north to look for a vehicle, and I went up there because I really wanted something that was fuel efficient. I wanted something that was a hybrid. We didn't have anything that was a hybrid locally. And so they said they had it. I wanted to negotiate over the phone. They didn't want to do that. They said I had to come up and that they only had one vehicle and I needed to get there before someone else got there. So I did drive up. And luckily, I was able to reach out to my support, my community, my brother. And my brother was like, you need to get out of there. You need to get out of there now. He really helped me to kind of frame the negotiation. He offered to speak to them, but I was like, I don't want to be that girl that's like, here, talk to my brother. And so, yeah, having that community, I was able to walk away. And I was able to get the same car later for about $10,000 less. So it was a very good thing that I was able to walk away and that I was able to tap into the resource of my family.
How does looking back on this experience Are there parts where you feel that negotiating could have helped you more? Like it's a hindsight thing.
Yeah.
What would you have done differently in involving negotiation?
For sure. So we're going to get into some of the tips that are really great for negotiation. And so while I had read this really incredible book, it's a resource I highly recommend by Chris Voss, who's a former FBI hostage negotiator. It's called Never Split the Difference, negotiating as if your life depended on it. He's an incredible resource. It's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and he has a masterclass on if you have masterclass called The Power of Negotiation. And so while I had heard some of these tips before and I used some of them in that state, I was not thinking about them. But some of the things that kind of helped me were when I spoke with my brother, he said, what is your best case that you want? What is the amount that would be the best case for you to pay, for you to feel good when you leave the dealership? And what's the amount that's just it's not an option for you? And so make sure that you're negotiating for that and that you're okay with walking away if they can't do it. Mm-hmm. Always leverage that power of being able to walk away. That it's just a thing, right? It's not the only thing in the world. And that's a lot of what the car salespeople were saying is, we have a shortage. This is the only car like this. You're not going to find another one. So many people want this vehicle. And then I learned that wasn't the case, because after that day, they still were calling me and blowing me up, trying to get me to purchase their cars that were so rare. So just being aware that however rare the deal looks, it's really not that rare, and being willing to kind of walk away and figure out what is your best case scenario, what is your worst case scenario, and not allowing yourself to accept the worst case scenario.
With everything in those tips and kind of playing it from the other side, when you either are buying from a business or you have your own business, how do you negotiate pricing? And when you're on the side of it's your business, how do you negotiate with yourself of like, okay, I really want to bring in great clientele, I want to bring in customers, but not sell yourself short, which I feel like a lot of business owners seem to do.
For sure. Yeah, this is something I totally struggled with in the very beginning of having my own business, and you are one that helped me to really not waver on my costs. And so when you're thinking about your rate as a business owner, I think it's really helpful to do some research and see what other people are charging in your area. Mm-hmm. Typically, there's enough for us all to win, right? The other thing I suggest is when you pick that rate, it's not just about the cost of that time. Right? So let's say you're doing a project for someone, maybe you're doing a marketing campaign for them, and you think it's going to take you maybe 4 hours to do some of the branding for them. We're not just charging for that 4 hours. We're charging for the years of expertise where you now only have to spend 4 hours on it. We're talking about the cost and time of all the training and the degrees that you have that allow you to do the work that you're doing. So thinking about that kind of wholeness of what it is that you're bringing to the table. One of my favorite sayings is you have not because you ask not. So when we start, hemming and hawing and bartering with someone and they haven't even asked us to go down in price, that's how we know we need to take a moment and just kind of be silent and let that customer decide if they are able to pay your fee or not. And if they're not, they'll let you know. And if they are, they'll let you know. But if you start going down and saying, well, I can do it for less, well then yeah, of course, they're going to want you to do it for less. People value things that they pay for, and people spend money on all kinds of things. Some people spend money every 2 weeks. They might spend $100 on their nails. People are able to pay the rate is what I have found. And so we shouldn't make assumptions about what someone is able to do. And so some of the reasons why we might choose to shortchange ourselves is really comes into how we perceive ourselves, what our beliefs are about our worthiness. If we feel like we're an imposter. So these feelings of inadequacy kind of come up, like where we're feeling like, well, you know what, I'm a new business owner, or I'm new on the scene, and we start making all these excuses. And so we don't want to say no to ourselves, right? We want to definitely say yes to ourselves, and we want to create opportunities for other people to say yes to us.
So as we talked about imposter syndrome and your own worthiness, how do you negotiate with somebody who needs to negotiate with themselves?
So one of the main things that I share out with someone who's really struggling with this is, first of all, let's stop measuring ourselves against others. When we're finding out what rates other people are using, that's just data points for us. That's helpful. But we don't want to measure what we're doing versus other people, right? So again, we're honoring our worth. We're honoring what it is that we bring to our practice. And so sometimes that looks like faking it until you make it, where you may not be feeling it, but you continue to gas yourself up anyways. You reach out to your community who are going to also kind of remind you of your worth, but also tapping into community. So there are all kinds of like forums, Facebook groups of other business owners that are sometimes worldwide, sometimes in your state, sometimes national. And that's also a really good resource of how they were able to kind of start their business. There's usually tools on there about how to set your pricing and how to stick to it. And even like sometimes it's helpful just to have like these helpful kind of go-to phrases that kind of anchor you back into why you're doing this. What's the big why? What's your big goal here? And so really when you have a negative thought, kind of checking that negative thought with, is this realistic? Is this helpful? It's probably not helpful for me to think that I need to reduce my cost by half when I won't be able to afford to keep my business afloat. So yeah, I recommend faking it till you make it, saying positive things to yourself along the ways to kind of remind yourself of your worth and what it is that you're doing, and then really tapping into community, because when you're having those periods where things aren't going well, having other people in that community who can kind of encourage you, but also share their stories of, and then also offer you advice like, hey, I noticed that on your website, you're marketing these skills, but you don't have these listed. And this is something that people really like. Or, doing some trainings on how do you boost your SEO so that more people are finding your website.
What do you say to a person who has a low self-worth and it's due to past trauma or past abuse? Like, how do they get over that, get through that? How can they negotiate a better way of life?
Yeah. So this is something that is more common than we might understand. So sometimes we might have experienced something that was traumatic, or maybe we were in an abusive relationship and this has lowered our self-esteem or our sense of worth. And so we might make excuses when we're being mistreated that, it's been worse than this. Or even if you're going to lower your rate, you might think to yourself, well, it's still a little bit more than what I made at this other job. And so when you're kind of working through those things, if it's abuse or trauma, I definitely recommend going alongside a mental health professional if you have that ability to do that. But really just being gentle with yourself, recognizing that part of this is my trauma response, that my initial reaction is this. And one of the things that I like to recommend to people, if they're having a hard time seeing their worth and their value, to think about someone that they love, if it's a small child that they have in their life that they really adore, just to kind of think of a smaller version of them and how they might show up and show love for that child version of them if they can find love for that person. And if it's not that person, then someone else that they love. So whether that's a godchild or, a neighborhood kiddo that, that they watch from time to time, but really thinking about the love that you have for that person and how can you show that back to yourself. So being gentle with yourself. If you do offer someone a discount and later you think, ooh, that was a bad mistake, we learn from it. We're gentle. We're not hard on ourselves. We're not saying we're a terrible business person. We say, okay, learning experience. Next time I'm going to navigate this a little differently. Thank you so much for listening to Embolden with Jessica. If you want to keep up with us, follow Embolden with Jessica on Instagram. Until next time.